Hello again and welcome back to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio. I'm Dave and in this video I'm going to be answering a question I was sent in about musical keys. The question came in and said, what scales should we practice more for playing melody? I mean the most used ones, for example an F or B minor or E. It's a good question. Now while it's true you will see, I think particularly in guitar oriented music, you'll see certain keys used a bit more often than others. Certainly in hard rock, E minor, A minor occur an awful lot. Ones that immediately spring to mind. A lot of Deep Purple stuff was in G. D's really popular, but I wouldn't say that there's any particular keys that I would say these are the ones that you need to learn and you need to get more proficient with. I would say treat all keys equally. And as a guitar player, you've got an advantage over some other instruments because of the way that the guitar's tuned, the way the fingerboard's laid out. You've got a lot of scales at your disposal, or scales in a wide variety of keys, without having to do a whole lot of relearning. This is where a tool like PhatPhish is really helpful. So if you take that and you dial in a type of scale, so for argument's sake we dial in a major scale and choose a root note of C, these are the notes of the C major scale arranged over the fingerboard. And you can do things like you look for scale boxes. So if you look for, say, a C on the bottom E string as the lowest note there, you can come up with a scale box like that. And you can use that box. You know, you can just play around that box and come up with melody lines. So if someone's playing a chord progression, you can improvise over the top just using a scale box like that. If someone was playing a chord progression in the key of, say, A major, well, you just move that entire scale box down, so your root note, instead of being on C, is actually on A, but the shape is the same. And you can take that scale box and improvise from that and come up with, or compose melody lines that just using things from that box. And that's your starting point. It's important though not to get locked into those scale boxes. You know, be aware of where the notes of the scales are around the fingerboard, and because that stops you just getting stuck in one part of the neck. It allows you to move around and, you know, move from, say, one box to another inversion around the fingerboard. And where that's useful, a useful way to think about that is not just to think about the notes in terms of their absolute note names. So yeah, if you're playing in the key of A major, knowing that you've got A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, that's useful, and being able to know where those particular note names occur on the fingerboard. Yeah, that's really useful. But what is more useful is to know that if you're playing on a particular degree of the scale, how many semitones up do you need to go to the next? So if you know that you're playing on the 5th degree of the scale, so in the key of A, you're playing on an E, the next note up in the scale, in the key of A would be F sharp, but that means 2 semitones higher than the 5th degree. It's two frets up from the E. So knowing that if you then took that shape and you moved it to another key, so it went from an A major to a G major, and you were playing on the 5th degree there, which is a D, and you want to go to the 6th, it's not about knowing, well, if D is the 5th degree, then the 6th degree, oh god, that must be E, where's there an E? Just know that if you're on the 5th degree, going up by 2 semitones takes you to the 6th degree of the scale. So thinking about the scales in terms of intervals rather than absolute note names is a really useful discipline to get into as well. The way the guitar's tuned, like I say, you can move scale boxes around and look at different ways of playing a scale. So that was an example I showed you there where we had a major scale box with a root note on the bottom E string. You could look at the same scale and say, well, how would I want to arrange that if instead of use my middle finger to play the root note, I was playing the 5th degree. Well, I could come up with a scale box that looks like this. So there's another box you could learn and learn how to transition from one area of the neck to the other, still playing in the same key, say in the key of C major in that example. But if you shifted it up a few frets, you could move it to a different key. If you moved it down a few frets, you could move it to another. There's a lot of flexibility there, so don't get locked into just one particular key. A very, very long time ago, hundreds of years ago, before we had what's called equal temperament. The way instruments were tuned, you were a bit more restricted on what keys you could actually play in. Around the time of Johann Sebastian Bach, we started to adopt equal temperament, which is a whole separate video in its own right. I'm not going to go into that now, but the important thing is that with equal temperament and the way that the instruments are tuned now, you've got all of the keys available to you. So you've got 12 notes in the chromatic scale, you've got 12 major scales available to you, a major scale with a root note on each of those notes from the chromatic scale. Likewise, natural minors, harmonic minors, melodic minors, there's lots and lots of scales. But what you're actually doing is taking a pattern, the formula of the major scale, and just rearranging it according to the root note. So don't get locked into particular keys. You don't have to. That said, there's something to think about is in regards to looking at a scale box and saying, well, if you could say all the scales are kind of equal, I can play that box anywhere on the neck. Certain things, whereas you, particularly when you exploit open notes or look at particular chord inversions, you'll find that certain keys allow you to do things that other keys don't. For example, if I was to play something like that's in the key of E, well, E minor. It's E minor pentatonic I was playing there mostly. But that is played using open strings. So I've got quite a big reach there. I'm going from open string all the way up to 5th fret. Now, if you imagine I wanted to take that, instead of playing it in E, I wanted to play it in F. We'll just move everything up by one semitone. Suddenly this index finger has got to take the place of the open string, so I've got to play it there. And I end up with something that's going to be really, really big stretches and really, really difficult to play. So in that example, I just couldn't play that in the key of F. Saying that example there needs to be played in E because of the way I'm using the open strings. So you might say, oh, well, that's great. E is a really good key for playing on the guitar. I'll use E. But then you could come up with another sequence of chords. So for example, I played A major, A sus4, A sus2, back to an A major. Quite nice chord sequence, that one. I could say, oh, that works. That's in the key of A major. Why can't I play that in E major? Well, you can't, because playing down this part of the neck, so go from like an E major, E sus4. Now I need to go to an E sus2, and I can't because the third string only goes down as far as G, and I need to go to an F sharp. I need to be like a fret -1. That just doesn't work. I need a completely different chord shape to become a different thing. I could probably arrange that major sus4, sus2 major sequence, but I couldn't use it like down like the cowboy chord area. That just doesn't work. I could move it, say, to D major. That works, but it doesn't work in E major. What works in one key may not work in another, and then you could get something else that just works in a key that something else doesn't work in. By keeping an open mind and not saying you're going to work exclusively with particular keys, it gives you that freedom. And if you're just experimenting and you come up with a chord and you think, where do I want that chord to go? Don't think, well, if I'm playing an A major chord, this has to be functioning as the one chord of A major because I work in the key of A major. It could function as the 4 chord of E major, could function as the 5 chord of D major. Different ways you could use that chord. So by thinking, well, I'm going to consider what other keys I could be playing in, rather than just saying, well, these are the keys that I work in. Keep an open mind, and it'll just make you a better, much more well-rounded musician. I think the strongest argument for perhaps favouring some keys more than others comes down to if you're playing with a singer. The singer might have a range where their voice is more more comfortable, where they don't want to be straining all the time. So if you have a singer who has got a really good voice and is really suited to a particular range of notes, then you will probably find that when you're writing music to play with them, you will want to focus on keys that are in the range that suits their voice. They could, I'm sure a good singer can sing across a wider range of keys, but you don't want to be always picking keys that's a bit of a strain for them. So that sometimes I think is in a band context is your main limiting factor. It's what the singer is capable of doing. Certain keys have a particular sound. I'm sure you watched Spinal Tap. If you haven't watched the Spinal Tap movie, pause this video, go off and watch the Spinal Tap movie and come back. But there's the bit in that movie where Nigel Tufnell's playing something and he talks about it being in D minor, which he calls is like the saddest of all keys. And yes, it will sound sad because it's in a minor key. So if we play a progression in D minor, yeah, that sounds quite sad. I could transpose that, say, to a different key, say A minor. Does one sound sadder than the other? Maybe it does. Maybe it has a slightly different voice to it. But there's all sorts of different ways you could play any given progression. So I was playing that progression there with the D minor. But I could play different chords. I could play. Sounds different. Yeah, there's no hard and fast rule that a particular key has to have a particular sound, especially on guitar, where you've got so many different ways of playing things. Yes, major keys generally will sound happy, minor keys will generally sound sad, harmonic minors will generally sound classical and gothic and that sort of thing. But as I say, the way you can take chords and arrange them and invert them, play them on different parts of the neck, the flexibility you've got. There's nothing that says D minor always has this particular sound and A minor has this particular sound that's distinct. You can give them their own flavour. So it's not a case of there's a particular key that you would need for a certain sound or a certain job. Always keep an open mind, and when you're practicing, have as wide a vocabulary of scales, as wide a vocabulary of chords and chord types and chord shapes, and knowing different inversions and where to play them on the neck. It just makes you a more rounded musician, rather than, as you were suggesting in your question, over focusing or just focusing on particular keys. That's not the way to go. Keep an open mind. I hope that helps. You also asked a question about do I have any intention of doing this sort of thing for keyboards and piano? No, I understand how music works on keyboard, but I'm a guitar player, so I'll leave the keyboard stuff to the keyboardists and keep the content on this channel focused on the guitar. Okay, I hope you found that useful. If you did, please click like down there if you really enjoyed it and you want to see other videos that I post on the channel, and please click subscribe, which is also down there, and click the bell icon next to it. That way you get notified of any new videos that I upload on the channel. You're welcome to leave a comment, but I don't always get notified by YouTube when people comment on videos. So if there's something specific that you want to ask me, whether it's about music theory, guitar playing, guitar gear, anything at all, you're better off going here, fill that form in, like the questioner for this video did. That way the question comes direct to me and I can get around to answering your question in a future video. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.